As we tend to do every year on this channel, in this video, we're going to go over the worst locker room cancers that are currently known about. Players who aren't the best when it comes to helping facilitate a positive atmosphere that fosters the team-first mentality. We'll go over each of their situations and past events that have pointed to the fact that they're not the greatest influence to have around. And with that, here are the top 4 locker room cancers of 2023. Now before we really dive into the antics of JT Miller summed up, since we're condensing things on this video, I'd like to mention that I do have a separate video where I broke the Miller drama down further in more detail. Link for that will be down below. With JT Miller, there's been a pattern of lackluster defensive play, which is linked in hockey culture to being a bad teammate oftentimes. A pattern of outbursts, whether they be on the bench or on ice directed at teammates, and a pattern of apathy in general. As most of us know, when a player has a bad vibe, it can easily contaminate a locker room and cause morale to be just as terrible as a player's attitude. An article from The Province summed up Miller pretty well. The article goes on to say, he's moody and prone to turnovers. He's hard on himself and his teammates. His frustration boils to the surface, with bad body language, stick slams, and F-bombs. Sure, it's one thing for a player to be passionate and wanting to help their team win, but in all actuality, does it help the team win when they're causing major distractions due to their loose cannon mentality? Also, the article I just mentioned has a previous quote from head coach Rick Tocchet that was directed at Miller. "You can't stop back-checking because you're mad at somebody. That's one of my rules," he says. I think that puts things into perspective. Quitting back-checking just because you're mad at someone. Now don't get me wrong, Miller is an offensively talented player and really took it to another level during the 2021-22 campaign. However, he's on this list because of his previous actions that we've seen in plain sight that have paved the way for him to be here. It's really not every day that we witness NHL captains losing their Cs. In fact, it's so rare that we haven't seen it happen since Jack Eichel lost his in 2021, prior to Wheeler losing his, of course. And it just so happened that the forward was stripped of his captaincy shortly before last season began. After serving in the position since 2016, Wheeler entered the 2022-23 campaign without a letter on his sweater entirely, as the Jets elected to go with 3 alternates instead. That didn't include the Minnesota native. While looking at the situation, there's 2 things that stick out here. Firstly, as I mentioned, players don't lose their Cs very often. In fact, outside of Eichel and Wheeler, all of the previous players that happened to have already retired, if that tells you anything. Secondly, considering all of the past situations that have allowed it to happen, usually there's a reason that has to do with the player's conduct, meaning how the player presented himself to teammates, coaches, etc., etc. Now, I previously did make a video about Wheeler's antics in a video I'll link down below if you'd like to get a more detailed breakdown. But another wrinkle to this story involves Patrik Laine. Remember at the beginning of Laine's career in Winnipeg, how happy he was and how well he was thriving? According to an article which I'll link down below, Laine told Finnish media that Blake Wheeler and Mark Scheifele were the main reasons as to why he wanted out of Manitoba. In a nutshell, the 2 bullied Laine relentlessly and made him feel inferior, especially in the locker room. Since Wheeler was the captain and according to Laine, ran the locker room, Laine was powerless to do anything about it. He revealed that previous head coach Paul Maurice was too afraid to do anything about it. Now, for those that may be questioning this story, it's always a good quality to be skeptical when it's hearsay. However, for me, this seems completely believable. When we look at the timeline of things, how did it unfold? Paul Maurice mysteriously leaves mid-season. The Jets get a replacement coach that is just filling in. And even before Rick Bowness's first season began with Winnipeg, Wheeler is stripped of captaincy. Everyone is entitled to their own interpretations, of course, but to me, it really seems likely that Wheeler was a large part of the problem in the dressing room. Similarly to the other 2 players, we went over the PierreLuc Dubois saga in greater length in a separate video, so yet again, if you'd like to get all of the small details that we're leaving out here, be sure to click the link for it below. So let's just put this simply. ever since Dubois has been a hockey player pretty much, he's never been happy with the team he's been on for long. And yes, PLD started the pattern of not staying put back when he was in the QMJHL, playing for the Cape Breton Screaming Eagles. And ever since then, whether it be the Columbus Blue Jackets or Winnipeg Jets, Dubois is never happy where he's at. Therefore, having a player that you know doesn't want to be there due to having a trade request submitted, which he's done more than once now, isn't a good vibe for the locker room. It sends a message that, for whatever reason, the player thinks he could easily play for a better team with a better supporting cast. Now, there's that issue also of how Dubois bid Columbus farewell, because this to me just showed his true colors and what kind of teammate he really is. In the very last game that Dubois played for CBJ against the Tampa Bay Lightning, he decided to very selfishly get his point across. It just so happened that before the 2020-21 campaign commenced, Dubois had formally submitted a trade request, not long before the Jackets' 5th game of the season. This had become public knowledge. Therefore, in an effort to manipulate GM Jarmo Kekalainen, Dubois quit playing entirely at times. Like I said, this was manipulative, but at the same time, Dubois was willing to help Tampa win just so he could switch teams faster. To me, that is far from having a team-first mentality and being a true leader. Anyways, people can change, that's completely true, but Dubois' unwillingness to try and stick it out with a singular team still is non-existent. I suppose we'll see how long he stays in Hollywood with the LA Kings before wanting out. Possibly one of the most dysfunctional hockey players we've seen in a hot minute, Tony DeAngelo is no stranger to controversy, from being suspended in the OHL due to either racial or homophobic slurs, to starting fights with NHL teammates. DeAngelo has been not the easiest player to get along with, and apparently last season demonstrated that he's not the easiest player to coach either. The latest bout of drama surrounding the defenseman has been centered around the fact that he wasn't able to be tamed by one of the most respected coaches in the league, John Tortorella. Tortorella is known for expecting his players to play for each other, which means having a conservatively defensive mindset. Prior to the 5 scratchings that DeAngelo was subjected to, Torts was upfront about his players' struggles when it came to his 2 underfoot game. The defensive liability is something we have to work on, the coach said. If you watch DeAngelo skate, it's not hard to figure out that he does have the capability to defend and to keep up with his opponents.
He in John Tortorella's doghouse a little bit. Yeah. I think it's more than just on-ice performance. Ashlyn, what do you think's going on? What does it mean for the future?
It's very confusing. And you think about Tony DeAngelo and Torts' track record throughout the season, and you can only read through the tea leaves. But it seems to be there was some type of conversation, confrontation, whatever you want to call it. We know that John Tortorella and the entire coaching staff wanted to see Tony DeAngelo play a more disciplined style of defense. They've said that all year long. And at times have gotten very frustrated with the way he's played defense, and they've wanted him to change. I don't know if we've necessarily seen that change in Tony DeAngelo's defensive style of play. So you can only imagine that they're asking for more. They're not seeing it. Tony DeAngelo isn't delivering what they're asking for, which leads to a benching.
However, his inability to listen and to adjust his game is presumably a big reason as to why he's supposedly getting traded. Therefore, DeAngelo isn't just here because of his past issues with teammates, but also because of the rift between player and coach. When there's a noticeable rivalry in the locker room, whether it be between players or this type of situation, it doesn't exactly contribute to a positive atmosphere. Even though things have been kept in-house in Philly, to scratch a player for 5 games in a single season just speaks for itself. If this wasn't DeAngelo, maybe it would be different. Considering his past and knowing how he's treated others before, it was an easy ad as far as this list was concerned. Current GM Danny Briere made the previous promise to change the culture when it came to the Flyers lineup for the better. And in Briere's mind, most likely, trading DeAngelo is going to help accomplish just that. In conclusion, it will be interesting to see what happens to Tony DeAngelo and where he ends up next, as the only team he's previously been linked to is the Carolina Hurricanes. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and if you're regularly consuming my content, I'd like to invite you to join my Patreon page. Plans start at just $1 a month and include perks such as unseen analytics, video previews, and monthly shoutouts. If you're interested in supporting me and my work, simply click the link below to get started. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.